Is it okay?
Yeah.
Can everyone hear me like this? I don't want to talk like this the whole time though. Is this okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I'm going to start off by talking about websites, so I'm really taking it old school here. But hopefully what I'm doing is, I wanted this presentation to be not necessarily about creating websites, because I know all of us have those, but it also applies if you're thinking about updating your website. Maybe you have some extra dollars to spend on revamping it. It's figuring out where you should strategically use those dollars. So I am, oh yeah, this only works on this side. I'm actually the strategy director at SGA, as Stephen mentioned, and what that essentially means is that I'm taking all components of marketing, websites, social media, grassroots, and figuring out how to put them all together to make them work in a program. So as a result of that, I end up working on a lot of websites, since that's kind of a given when you're working on any program. So before we start, I wanted to give you kind of a glimpse at some of the websites that SGA has done to give you some context to the kind of clients or websites we work on. So as Stephen mentioned, mainly a lot of local government sites, whether it's cities. We've also done nonprofits or sites that are funded by grants, is primarily kind of our backyard. And like Stephen mentioned, we've even won some awards for them. So I just wanted to establish the context and credibility so that you'll know that I know what I'm talking about. So without further ado, on to the presentation. So the real question is, do you want your website to have a real connection with your visitors? And I know that we're all sitting in this room because the answer to that question is yes. But how do we then get to that? How do we make sure, you put all this information out there, you spend all this time, how do you know that it's actually having a real connection with your visitors? So the answer is analytics. And I'm not going to go into, I know everyone who has websites here is very familiar with unique visitors and returning visitors and those types of analytics. So I'm not going to go into those, not because I don't think they're important, but because I think a lot of us are already tracking that. But specifically, I'm going to talk about reports that you can use through Google Analytics. And in our experience, we've used, oftentimes when you host your website on like 1&1 or GoDaddy or platforms like that, they'll do their own tracking for you and give you unique visitors. What we've found though is that we've now started putting all the websites we work on Google because it just creates an industry standard. We noticed that with some of these other ones, we didn't know what they were tracking. Some of them were tracking like those little bots that crawl your website to look for information. They were counting that as a visitor, some of them weren't. And so to stop comparing apples to oranges, we start putting everything on Google, and it helps to kind of create that industry standard. So we're specifically going to look at 5 Google Analytics reports today, and I'm going to tell you how you can use them to really shape and drive your decisions for your website. So the first one is Map Overlay. We're going to go over the Traffic Sources report, In-Page Analytics, Site Content, and the goal conversions. So the first step for any website, as you all well know, in any public education program, is knowing who your audience is. And once you know who your audience is, what reports do you use to make sure that you're reaching them effectively? So the first report that we're going to look at is looking at Map Overlay in combination with the Traffic Sources report. So the Map Overlay is a really straightforward Google report. You'll notice once you start getting into these Google Analytics, you can just spend days looking at the numbers. So if you're a numbers person, it's going to be just the ticket for you. Sometimes it can get a little complicated, but this one's actually fairly simple. So it is just what it looks like. It literally is just showing you where your visitors are coming from geographically. So the obvious one being if your program is in a specific geographic area, which I know a lot of ours are, you want to make sure that you're hitting people from that area. The second one is the Traffic Sources, and this is where I talked about it starts to get like you see numbers for days. So I'm just going to focus on one specific area of this report. traffic sources is essentially telling you where your visitors are coming from. So I wanted to point out some different things here. You'll notice the first one says direct none. That just means it's people who are directly typing in www.visitmywebsite.com or whatever they're typing in. The second one says Google, and then it says organic. So you know that these are people who are finding your website from organic search results on Google. They're typing something in, your website's popping up, and they're clicking on it. And then this third one here says Facebook, and then you'll see it says referrals. So this is all those other websites that are out there that are linking back to your site. So this report is important for a number of different reasons. So one, this is really helpful, especially if you're doing online promotions, whether you're placing ads in places online, or even if you're trying to get other websites to link back to you. You want to see which ones are working, right? So if you're doing ads and you're doing Facebook and Craigslist and Google, you might start off kind of doing an even split between all of those, but eventually you want to scale back on the ones that really aren't bringing in a return, and then ramp up the ones where you're getting more traffic from. The other thing that this is helpful for is kind of just keeping an eye on which websites are linking back to yours. I had an experience with one of the clients that I worked for. I'm not going to say what city, but you'll see why. I was looking through a traffic sources report, and I noticed that there was a referral domain from, it was like www.ilovemaryjane.com or cannabisiscool.com or something like along those lines. Needless to say, it wasn't the kind of crowd the city wanted to be associated with. And so in that case, what we did is we just contacted the webmaster and asked if, said, I'm so glad you found the site's content to be useful, but if you wouldn't mind, can you please take down our link? So that was it. As easy as that. So that one is more rare, but you never know who's linking back to your site, the good or the bad, and so it's good to keep an eye on this one. So the next thing is, I know, this is my dog. I had to find a way to stick it in here. This is actually at SJ's Bring Your Dog to Work Day. So her name's Panda. The important thing is to set and track your, I need to click because I'm going to keep talking about her. Okay, how do you set and track those goals? So the two reports you want to look at here are the goal conversions report and the in-page analytics report. So for goal conversions, this is another one where you see numbers all over the place. Specifically, all your websites, you should ideally have an action you want people to take. So if you don't have a specific, when people come to your site, obviously they're coming for information, but you should ideally have some kind of action that you're trying to drive them to do. Because otherwise it's a missed opportunity, right? So for salespeople, this is a no-brainer. They want, to schedule a consultation or, make a sale. But for local government, there's still a lot of opportunities to drive action. So maybe it's you want a newsletter subscriber for that person who visited. Maybe it's you want to make sure that person's clicking over to your Facebook page and becoming a Facebook fan. Or maybe, you have an online pledge and you want to make sure they're taking that online pledge. So essentially, if you don't already have an action in mind, you're losing a lot of missed opportunities of people coming to your website. So what goal conversions does is it actually lets you go in there and set specific goals for whatever conversion you're looking for. So if you want those e-newsletter subscribers, or maybe you want to make sure they come and they click on a specific link, you can set up custom goals in Google and tell them what goal you want, and they'll track. So are people doing it? Where are they coming from? The people that do convert, to again let you help refine your efforts more. The other one is in-page analytics. So this is a screenshot of a homepage of a website that we had done, and you'll see all these kind of little orange talk bubbles coming out of them. What Google does is it literally transposes over what you have on your site and gives you percentages of where people are clicking on that homepage. Cool. Yeah, it is cool. Exactly. And so this is a especially useful for home pages. It kind of starts to get into A/B testing, which I won't get into too much because I know John's going to talk about that. But essentially, it lets you see basically if people are clicking where you're hoping they're clicking. So the first thing this does is, if you figure out what's the most important thing on your homepage, and then are people in fact clicking on that, and then why are they clicking on it? It's more prominent, whatever it might be. The second thing is, this is really useful if you're thinking about spending some extra dollars on your site and you're trying to figure out where you should spend those dollars. So for example, here we have, maybe there's a toss-up between, okay, should we beef up the success stories page or should we make, the career opportunities page better? Well, based on this, it looks like 55% of people are clicking on career opportunities and only 5% are clicking on success stories. So it would make sense to probably beef up that career opportunities page, since almost more than half your website traffic seems to be going there first, to make sure that's a really compelling page. So the next thing is you want to make sure that you're checking and keeping an eye on your content and seeing what it's telling you about the website. So how are we going to do this? Again, 2 reports. We're going to look at the site content report and the traffic sources report. So with the site content report, you see what I mean about just number overload. But what I'm going to point to here, what this tells you is literally the most popular pages on your site. So it ranks them by order. It tells you how many unique page views. So what I want to do here then is isolate these 2. So this is an interesting story actually, because this is for a website that we were redesigning for the City of LA, their stormwater program website. And they had been around. I mean, the website was like one of the first websites that had ever been created when websites were first coming out. So literally like a decade, which in website years is like 100 years or something. And so it had tons of pages. And so initially we were going through and kind of trying to cut off some of the fat, figuring out the pages that we really didn't need anymore, trying to tighten it up. And one of the pages was this kind of what we thought generic how to prevent pollution page. And we're like, oh, we're not going to need that one because it's not even really covering on stormwater, so we should take that out. Then we started getting in the data from these Google Analytics reports and saw that it was the most popular page on the website. So one, it was a no-brainer that we weren't going to take it out. The second thing that was interesting is you'll notice the entire page has 1,657 unique page views, and then 1,604 entrances. That means that only around 40 people or so are going to that page from another page on the website, and then 1,600 people, that's the first page they're getting into your website on. The first page they're landing to on your website, which is huge. And so the traffic sources report then will make more sense given that. So with this, you'll see the last traffic sources report I showed you was by domain, like website domain where they're coming from. This one is by keyword searches. And so you'll see the keyword searches that people are typing in to most get to your website, and it's how to stop pollution, how to prevent pollution, how can we stop pollution, stopping pollution. And so we think what happened here is that because the website had been around for so long, almost 10 years or so, they had created this page and put those keywords on it. And since that time, the longer your website is around, the more credibility it gains with the search engines. And so they kind of cornered the market on this search term, searching for stopping pollution. And so it just so happens that they're funneling a lot of these people into their website. So what this traffic sources report does for you, though, is it can do 2 things. So one, you can see how are people usually getting to your website? What are they searching that your website's coming up? And then 2, it shows you where the holes are. Because maybe there's something very specific on your website that you want to promote and push out, whether it's composting or whatever it might be. And if you don't see those search terms coming up, that means that 1, either not that many people are searching for that term, or 2, they are and your website's just not showing up. So this is where you kind of start getting into search engine optimization and SEO, if any of you have done that for your website, looking at keywords. But If you want to start doing that, you can actually go to Google and see how many people are searching for specific terms. So if you're interested in composting or vermicomposting or reuse or whatever it is, you can see how many people are searching for that. And then ideally, you're trying to funnel those people over to your site. So this is the famous page, or the infamous page that we were almost going to cut from the LA Stormwater website. In terms of how we did it is, we obviously made sure to put the page up again, but also another key thing is that if you're ever redoing or redesigning your site, make sure especially to check on those redirects. Especially when you have popular pages like this, we want to make sure that people don't have them bookmarked and then they go to the bookmark and then it's a broken or dead link. So making sure that those redirects are going back to your new pages on your website so that you're not losing any of your visitors. And last but not least, you want to continuously review and assess your engagement. So the nice thing and maybe the curse about websites is that it's not a brochure that you put together and print and you put it out and you're done. It's constantly changing and evolving, and it really should be. We have Google tools like Google Analytics, which give us all these metrics. And so we want to certainly make sure that we're using the metrics to then drive action. They shouldn't be kind of like, oh, this is interesting, but it really should be figuring out how are those metrics helping you decide where you put your money in your website, or what pages are being viewed not enough on your website, and you need to figure out how to get more people there. So reviewing and assessing engagement. So again, it's the map overlay report, the traffic sources report, the in-page analytics report, the site content report, and the goal conversions report. And the idea is that you're kind of using all these in tandem with one another, not necessarily one in isolation, and kind of mixing and matching to figure out how you can make decisions for your website. And then of course, you see winning results. I'm not a sports person, but my husband said that this guy's like the bee's knees, so winning results slide. And that's it. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, I'll take this.
Really basic questions.
Sure.
How do you get Google Analytics?
Mm-hmm.
You say
Yeah.
go get Google Analytics.
Yeah,
I have
go
no
get that.
clue. I'm
Yeah, no.
clueless back
Great
here.
question. Great question.
Is
So-
it free? Do you buy it?
It's free. I mean, it's amongst those, many Google tools that are on the internet now that are free. So it is actually free. All you need to do is set up a Google account, just like your standard Gmail account, and then you get access to all these free Google tools, including analytics. So what you need to do is you can just Google Analytics, and then it'll come up. You can sign up for it there, it's free, and then they're going to give you a piece of code that you then have to take and then embed in the back end of your website. It's really simple for a developer to just go in there and copy and paste it. They just want to make sure that you're tracking statistics for sites that you actually have control over. So that's why they have you put it in the back end, and then it starts tracking it from there. Just a note, if your website's already on a content management system, essentially a content management system is just, how would I describe it? A centralized way of updating your website. So it kind of has like a back-end database where you can update your website, as opposed to if it's on an older school HTML style website where every single page, when you make a change on one thing, you have to change every single page. Google Analytics is not as seamless on those older websites as it is on content management system websites. So just something to note. And if you have any questions, you can always email me and I'll put you in touch with our web person and she can walk you through it. Yes.
Is it possible to only track certain pages of websites, or do you need to track the entire website? Like, because we have a small portion in a much larger website that I manage, so it's like I only have a certain area that I can.
That's a good question. I know for content management systems, you literally just take the code and paste it in one place and it tracks the entire website. For those older HTML websites, it is like you need to copy and paste it almost into every page. But for your situation where you're kind of under an umbrella of a larger one, I don't know. We'll talk offline and I'll find